Morning. I'd like to call to order the Town of Hilton Head Island Finance and Administrative Committee for Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Krista, have we complied with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we have.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Harkins?
Here.
Mr. Stanford?
Here.
Mr. Lennox?
Here.
All present, sir.
Thank you. Krista, does staff have any changes to the published agenda?
No, sir, no changes.
Does committee have any recommended changes?
No, sir.
Move to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same. I would like to remind our citizens of the town's rules and procedures for public comment. Once your name has been called, please state your name for the record. Each citizen has 3 minutes to address town council and this committee. At the end of the 3 minutes, you are asked to conclude your comments. Citizens are asked to maintain a decorum suitable for the medium and refrain from any profane, abusive, or obscene language. Krista, is there anyone signed up to address this committee?
Yes, sir. Today we have Mr. Skip Hoagland signed up to address the committee.
Good morning, Skip Hoagland, Windmill Harbor. Mr. Lennox, there's only one way to stop your corruption, that's keep exposing it. Mr. Lennox, you, Orlando, lawyers Coltrane, Gruber, Bush, and dishonest Bluffton town lawyer Finger have all been caught committing fraud with the drafting of a 5-year DMO chamber contract to allow the illegal issue and use of millions of tax funds by Bill Miles and the Hilton Head Bluffton Chamber. Mr. Lennox, you schemed this purposely, eliminating any accounting provision, and the reason is Bill Miles told you it was a secret sauce and it was none of your business or taxpayers. Mr. Lennox, you, Harkins, and McCann claim you went to the chamber offices to see the chamber accounting, and you reported all looked okay. This is another lie and a fraud by you. We desperately need an FBI investigation and a deep forensic independent audit on all town records that CPA John Troyer, Steve Riley, and now Bluffton Orlando control on where all the taxpayers' funds have been used legally, illegally, criminally, and disappeared. You were all hired, elected, and trusted to approve and spend and guard tax money like your own money, not funny money in the game of Monopoly. Mr. Lennox, can you name one thing I've said wrong about your illegal issue and use of millions of tax funds by tax thief Bill Miles in the chamber? Can you? No, you can't. Mr. Lennox, the recent town audit by Green Finney firm, who I called, said this was not an independent audit, just a hired audit showing the numbers they were handed by John Troyer and ethics violator Gruber and Orlando, all proven to be dishonest and all used tax funds illegally. You called this a positive external audit report. It's total fraud. This audit is nothing but an internal hired town audit that only showed the numbers that you and town insiders want us to see. Only a forensic audit will identify crimes committed by insiders like you, Orlando, Troyer, and Gruber. Again, each of you have already been caught breaking the law. What does this tell you? 2022 focus will be forensic audits, chamber's tax theft, my $50 million town lawsuit being filed for criminal misuse of tax funds. Mr. Lennox, these are very serious allegations and could result in your and others' arrest. This cesspool of corruption must end. A swamp is a beautiful place. This is a nasty place. Mr. Lennox, you agree today to a forensic audit right now, today, and to all taxpayers in this room. Do you agree to go undergo a forensic audit? Yes or no? Well, I'm going to tell you something. You and Harkins and McCann will all be leaving soon. You're all not running, as I understand. And you're going to be leaving disgraced. A man should always leave things better than he found them, and the only good that a man leaves behind before he dies is the good that he left behind, not the corruption. You are a disgrace to this town.
Krista, any other public comments?
No, sir, that concludes appearance by citizens.
Thank you. Under new business, we have one item, and it's a topic we've been working on as a committee for a couple of months. We received the data for the 2020 census late last year, and were asked to review, assess, and recommend any required redrawing of town council wards. It is town council's intent to ensure significant review and public participation in developing redistricting plans based upon this census data. This committee held a series of 4 workshops in February to solicit such public input and to review a preliminary GIS-generated map and any alternative maps which grew out of each subsequent workshop. The product of those discussions and workshops is 6 maps, which we are here this morning to review. The committee is charged with evaluating and analyzing options which are in compliance with the 1965 Voting Rights Act as amended, and recommending a preferred option which clearly defines each of the town's 6 wards. This recommendation will be reviewed and considered by Town Council at its March 15th meeting, 2 weeks from today. And as he has done in each of our previous workshops, Josh Gruber and staff will outline the process to date and give you more detail on how these maps were derived. After the staff's presentation, I'll open the floor for comments and for questions from the public. At the conclusion of the comments and questions, I'll ask the committee to discuss and review what we've heard and to recommend a map to be presented to Town Council as our preferred alternative via an appropriate motion and proper second. And as is our procedure, we'll then have ample time to further discuss the motion in total before I call the question. All clear? Mr. Gruber, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As we've started all of these meetings, wanted to take an opportunity to thank the public that is here, because the purpose of these meetings is to engage with the public in these discussions and to have an open dialogue with them as we go through this process. And so we thank every one of you for being here, for taking time out of your day to come participate. In a minute, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matt Carey with our GIS department, who's going to walk us through kind of the history of what we're doing, why we're doing it, where we've been to, and now where we are. But again, as we go through this, we're still, at this point, even today, still taking comments from the public. So we would encourage folks, if you have questions, if you have concerns, now is your opportunity to go ahead and help participate in this process. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Carey.
This is a young man that's done a lot of work on drawing maps over the past 60 days.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So we've had a series of meetings to go over this, so I'm going to be a little bit brief on some of the introduction material to get into the maps. So redistricting is the process of redrawing lines for voting areas, and they are conducted after the census every 10 years before the next major election. Our next election coming up is this November. So we've been working for the past 2 months or so, myself and Chris Carnline on GIS staff, to put together maps based on what we received from the census. So with redistricting, there's certain requirements that we have to meet in order to produce a proper map. The first requirement is that all districts must be of equal population, is to try to achieve a goal of 1 person, 1 vote. The districts must comply within the Federal Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have an equal opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. The districts must be drawn contiguously, meaning that all areas within the district must be able to touch each other. In our area, it's important to note that districts can be continuous over bodies of water. The districts must minimize divisions of voting precincts, cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest. So we've gone out of our way to ensure that the communities of interest there's no real hard definition of what it is, but we're taking things into consideration such as the PUDs, historic neighborhoods, and things of that, such as that. The districts must be geographically compact, and they must comply with other applicable court decisions and federal and state laws. This is the original town council map that we had to work with, set up from the previous census. And as you can see, the deviation for this map is 23.5%. There's a state recommendation that the greatest deviation can only be 5%. The legal limit is 10%. So based off of these numbers, you can see that we could not keep the town council wards as they were, so we had to make a change of some sort. This led to our preliminary GIS generated map that Chris Cronline and I put together. There's a few small changes to the areas. As you can see here, they're pointed out, and this is all available on the website for anybody that wants to dive deeper into it. And based off of this, we were able to have a deviation range of 0.27%. So that is within the state's recommendation. From here, we moved on and received citizen input as well as town council input. This is the first alternative that we put together based off of citizen input. And the largest change in this map right here is moving the Point Comfort area into Ward 5 and taking what we had in the preliminary map of the Forest Beach areas being moved into Ward 5 and moving those into Ward 3 to balance out the shift of moving Point Comfort into Ward 5. And with this one, we had a deviation range of just over 5%. So it's a little bit outside of the state's recommendation, but it does meet the required 10% deviation. The next alternative we have came from Councilman Brown, and the most significant change from the preliminary map was moving this area right here on Marshland Road back into Ward 1. And as you can see with this one, there's a population deviation of 3.87%. So that is within the state's recommendation. The following is a recommendation that came from Councilwoman Becker. And this had changes moving Shipyard into Ward 4 and also keeping the Forest Beach area within Ward 4. In the preliminary map, we had that moving into Ward 5. And with hers, it is a population deviation of 9.66%, but that is within the legal limitations. The following came from Mr. Stanford, and the largest change in this map was moving the areas of the headlands, which is in Hilton and Plantation, into Ward 2. So in the preliminary map, this area outlined in red was in Ward 6, and it would also be moving portions of the headlands into Ward 6. But in this one, we kept this portion of the headlands in Ward 2 and joined the southern portion of the headlands into Ward 2 as well to keep that neighborhood intact. And in addition, we moved this area outlined in red here from Ward 2 into Ward 6, which joins some other sub-neighborhoods of Hilton and Plantation together inside of that ward. And with this map, you can see the population deviation is just over 4.25%. This brings me to the map that was just proposed a few weeks ago, and this one is looking at putting all of those options together into one map to see if they can all work. And this one, there is, you can see all these areas outlined in red here are where the changes are, and I'll go over those moving from north to south. So this, I apologize for the blurriness here, you can't really read that, but this is available on our website for anyone to see if they want to follow up with this. So this is moving all of the Forest Beach areas into Ward 3, and then moving the majority. We weren't able to capture all of Point Comfort because of the numbers. These are very large blocks up here, but it's moving the majority of Point Comfort into Ward 5. It keeps Alternative 2's proposal of keeping this area of marshland in Ward 1, and that balances out by moving this block up here, which includes Jarvis Creek Club, and moves along the north side of the Cross Island, and moving that from Ward 1 into Ward 4. Additionally, there's moving this area right here, which is the Follyfield neighborhood, out of Ward 6 and into Ward 4. And as you see before with Mr. Harkin's proposal, it has all of the headlands inside of Ward 2 and moving the Hickory Forest and Dolphin Head area of Hilton Head Plantation into Ward 6. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to everyone, if anyone has any questions.
Deviation.
Oh, just, let's go over that really quick. So the deviation with this one is actually the tightest of everything that's proposed, and that is 3.81%.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
What questions or comments do you have for either Matt or Josh or the committee? Larry? Larry, please come forward.
The maps that we just saw up there, are they in use?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
They are. Thank you.
Jack?
Jack Daly, Forest Beach. And you're going to have to try harder out there. I snuck right past the guy. He was on his phone. I went right around I'm just kidding. But no, thank you for the consolidated plan option 5. You know, Forest Beach, 10 years ago in this process, we were actually blindsided. We weren't really aware of how these things worked. We were divided into 3 wards. It's been a struggle ever since. And we're very thin minorities in those 3 wards, right? And that's never good. And then there are those people who would tell us, oh, well, don't you now have 3 town council people? Well, that's the same kind of cynical and cold consolation you give to a child whose parents are divorced, and you say, now you've got 2 homes, you're going to have 2 Christmases and twice as many grandparents. No, home is home. And we want to be in one home. And I talked about this with some of y'all, have everybody in one ward, one home, one people. And that's where we want to be, and that's where we've wanted to be for 10 years. And honestly, no offense to Tom, but we don't want to be in Sea Pines. I was on Circle to Circle, Tom was there, David, some other people were there, for 18 months. I was the only person from Forest Beach there. And honestly, to a lot of the people in Sea Pines, present company accepted, Forest Beach is kind of an irritant. We're clogging up the road, we're clogging up Pope Avenue, we're making things difficult for them. And if we were placed in Ward 5 with a large gated community, we would be the permanent minority, and we would probably never break out and actually have representation in that minority. We just have to, or in that ward, we just rely on the good nature of people like Tom Lennox to listen to us and pick up the phone. And that you can't bank on that. Tom, who's the next person? I don't know. Will they care? They don't have to. All the comments on Circle to Circle were like, let's open up all your private beach accesses for the public. Things, they kind of scoffed at our simple mercantile aspirations in Coligny. They were already set, So thank you for putting us in a like-sized ward with like-sized neighbors where we're an equal number with a lot of people there. It's like being short on the basketball team with all short people. You might actually get the ball. So 2 thank yous today. Thank you, and I encourage you, keep us together. Home is home. And we're grateful after 10 years that's been noticed by all of y'all. And then put us in a group where all the kids are our same age, our same size. And please put us in Ward 3. That's all I have, unless y'all have some questions. But thank you.
David?
David Ames, Ward 3 representative. Gentlemen, you are aware that I've been involved in the process from the beginning. I've watched it. Unfortunately, your last meeting occurred at a time when I was at home, unable to be at the meeting. I think you've heard me say that anytime there is a change in a redistricting map, questions can arise as to what the motivation is. So I think even the chairman of the committee and I have had conversations on this to have as few changes as possible in a redistricting map makes sense. What is proposed in this last edited map, and I think Mr. Daly made my argument much easier, because this map puts me in an untenable position. On the one hand, I'm approached by people in Point Comfort saying, we do not want to be a part of the Sea Pines because our votes will be lost. And that's precisely what South Forest Beach, North Forest Beach is saying is their reason why they want to be in Ward 3. The untenable position for me as a representative is that, in a sense, I have to say, I don't care about you as a constituent group, or I don't care about you as a constituent group. And clearly that's not the case. I'm going to represent whoever is in my district. And so I come before you today pleading from Point Comfort's point of view. They don't want to change. And yet, if there is a change, I'm going to represent Forest Beach to the highest standards that I can. But it really is, in my opinion, a mistake to make a change unless there is an obvious and prevailing reason to do so, and I haven't heard that in this case. Thank you.
Other comment? Patsy?
Good morning, Patsy Bryson, representing the Coalition of Island Neighbors, and I'm also on the board of the League of Women Voters. We care about mostly two things in this process. One is making sure that you comply with the criteria, especially respecting and honoring communities of interest. And secondly, public input. So I'm here to thank you publicly again for your public input sessions. I hope they've proved to be useful and helpful to you during this process. I think that the public has indeed participated, although with the meetings not being in the evening, perhaps there are some working folks who could not have participated. Granted, they could have submitted written comments, but it might have been helpful to at least have one of them in the evening for working folks. In addition, at your last workshop, I mentioned or I asked about what efforts had been made to reach out to the Latinx or Hispanic community. Councilmember Brown responded about reaching out to Mr. Esquivel with La Isla, which is a communications network to the Latinx Hispanic community. I also submitted an email to the committee on Friday suggesting, I hadn't thought about it at the time, but Catholic churches are also a way to reach out to the Latinx or Hispanic community. And I'm hoping that you have done that. If not, I would urge that you do that before you complete this process, because that's a significant community of interest on our island. And I hope that, and I'm sad that the staff didn't make more outreach efforts to that community. So I'd urge you to do that before you complete your process. Separately, as an individual, I'm happy to land wherever I land. I respect both the wishes of Forest Beach Association. I've been a member. I'm a neighbor. I live in South Forest Beach. Also, I greatly respect Councilmember Ames' plea on behalf of Point Comfort. So as an individual, I'll land where I land, and I'll honor the decision. But thank you very much for the opportunity, and I trust that you will move forward with great respect for all of the community on all of the island. Thank you.
Thank you, Patsy. Other comment? Morris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me to echo what David and Ms. Betsy said, is that I commend the committee and I commend the staff in particular for the hard work they've done to pull these different suggestions and different ideas and different concepts forward for you to review. The effort of dividing up people and dividing up a community is certainly not an easy one when it comes to representing or determining who's going to represent you. And we know that you've done your best and you're trying to do your best to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and every angle or every position is considered or every suggestion is considered. Certainly, my interest is that of commonality and diversity and all of those things that would make our island one island. And we know that you as representatives, as you as elected officials, have a tough job in representing all of the interests fairly and without bias, because that's human nature. We are different people and we are different background and we have different belief and different philosophy. However, I tend to think that what you've done is certainly, or what you're doing is certainly in the best interest of all of us, and we pray that the effort to respond to all of the concerns is a genuine effort and is an effort that you all will continue through this process. Redistricting is not easy, it's painful, and with our island growing as much as it is growing with different people and different philosophy and different belief, it always will be a challenge. 10 years from now, we'll probably look at it and say, well, gee whiz, we did not do what we should have done, because here I am in a district of completely different people or different philosophies, etc. But let me just say that I commend you for listening. I commend the staff for listening and considering the suggestion that were given to them, and hopefully when we finish the process, it's a product that we will all be willing to live with and continue to make our town a better town. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Morris, and thank you for attending each of the 4 workshops. And you were important to the process. I appreciate that. Before I bring it back, any other comments? Steve?
Steve Halford, a resident of Sea Pines. Change is always hard unless you initiate it yourself, and that's not the case of the people who reside in the various areas here. We have heard statements that the people, some people, if not a sizable group of people in the Forest Beach area, don't want to be part of the Sea Pines area. And there's been a suggestion that people in Point Comfort don't want to be part of Board 3. That has to be resolved in some way. Whoever represents Sea Pines in the upcoming, and Ward 5 in the upcoming election, is going to have to deal with a different area, whether it's Forest Beach or whether it's Point Comfort. Anybody who comes at that seriously is going to pay a great deal of attention to the minority area, the smaller area. I think many of us believe, however, that Point Comfort area is much more similar to the basic aspects of Sea Pines than is the Forest Beach area. And therefore, it would be a lot easier to represent that smaller group than it would be to represent the area of Forest Beach. So from the point of view of a representative from Sea Pines, the consolidated map is one which we very much appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, if there are no additional comments, I'll bring it back to the committee and start out by saying I recognize that this is a mathematical exercise and the math has to work. If I had my druthers, I would prefer to do nothing. I would prefer to keep the existing map as is. But we're challenged by a deviation of nearly 30% and recognize that that won't happen. hence the exercise that we went through. And I would say that I was very pleased with the work that staff did in exercising the options available and still coming up with maps where the deviation was well under 5%. And the lower the deviation, the stronger the map is in terms of defending it against any challenges. So I think the staff has done a wonderful job, and we have alternatives to review as a committee and discuss, and I'd like to bring it back to the committee and open it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a sincere, I just came from the dentist, so I'm not going to be too articulate, but sincere thanks to the public and yeoman effort on the part of staff. Thank you very much. You made our job a lot easier. When you look back to where we started, it was clear that the status quo was not going to be acceptable. We were mandated to change. And so that's what's before us today. From my perspective, looking at each of the alternatives that have been presented, and I'm very grateful for each of them. In my opinion, the consolidated reflects the best effort in terms of meeting the criteria that we're bound to comply with. So for that reason, I'll be moving my support in that direction. I'm comforted, though, by the fact that the people that sit here today and those that are not here but will be here this afternoon, that we're in a nonpartisan environment. And for my years of experience here on Town Council, I can in a very sensitive way indicate that working with colleagues sitting on this dais, that the view has been, in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, it's been a one island view. And so I think when we make decisions here, I know when we make decisions here, we're not thinking of District 1 or District 2 or District 3. We're looking at Hilton Head. And so I think the public should be comforted by that, and the record proves that. So yes, this has been a mathematical exercise. It's been mandated. And when you look historically, what brought this law into existence? It was the reality that minority populations had difficulty in getting their point across and their position resolved. Mr. Campbell has been a faithful servant of the minority population coming before us on each of these events. And I keep asking him, have we done the best we can to ensure that the minority populations are being represented? And recognizing it can't be perfect, but have we optimized that situation? And I can't speak for Mr. Campbell, but I think we have, and I'll let him speak for himself. So thank you.
Any other? Alex.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too want to give great thanks to the staff for being so attentive and in some cases moving stuff around on the fly. Really appreciate your efforts in this. And of course, the public also. There's one thing that has been brought up by Ms. Bryson that I do want to make a couple of comments on. As we look around this room, And as we think back on the 4 workshop sessions that we've had, we have not had anybody from the Hispanic community participate, okay? And we could probably come up with a lot of reasons as to why not, okay? I want us to take that as an opportunity for us to do better, okay? And I'm not sure what do better means at the moment, but I know we need to do better. I think we've done an enormous job in attempting to protect that community interest through this process, okay? And as far as the numbers are concerned, that proves it, right? But yet, the point still remains, we are not truly connected, and we need to do better at connecting with that community. So if it's beating down the door at the church, if it's calling Mr. Esquivel every time, I'm not sure, but our efforts have to increase. Overall, that's all of us, right? We have to increase that effort. So I charge us as a council, and I charge us as a town to really get better at that, okay? So those are my comments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I think that's a charge that we need to take very seriously, and thank you for reaching out to Eric and the community in the process. Glenn.
Thank you. I echo my colleagues' appreciation to staff for your professional efforts here, your willingness to work with us, to listen to what the public has said, to tolerate our relative ignorance on some of these things. You've done a great job with that, and I sincerely appreciate that. I hear the point that Mr. Ames makes about Point Comfort. We've had 4 public sessions at various locations around this town, and to my knowledge, we have not heard a word about someone from Point Comfort requesting a change other than what Mr. Ames has said. So I listen to that, but I'm wondering, Matt, if I could ask you, please, is it possible to move Point Comfort back into Ward 5 and keep the other changes as we have them in the consolidated map?
So I briefly ran through a scenario to see if all of Point Comfort could be kept in Ward 5 and all of the changes for the entirety of the South Forest and North Forest beach areas being in Ward 3. Or sorry, the other way around, excuse me. So it would be all of Point Comfort in Ward 3 and all of the South and North Forest beach areas in Ward 5. And the numbers would work out with that. We haven't made an official alternative with that scenario, but it could work.
I'm not sure that's the answer to my question. If we leave South Forest Beach, all of Forest Beach in Ward 3, will it work to move Point Comfort?
Also into Ward 3?
Yeah.
That would not work out, no, sir.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I just wanted to have that on the record, so thank you. It makes it clear that that just simply doesn't work. So you've answered my question, and I appreciate that. Going through this process, it's my experience in life that the thing that we resist the most is change. And that's human nature. And as we get older, that gets more and more true. But here, we were forced to make changes by the law. The law is there for a good reason. It is there to achieve the fairest level of representation for everyone in the community, district by district, or as we say here, ward by ward. I have learned a lot in going through this process, and I've seen it evolve. I have seen input from various members of the community, from people on the council, and from others about what is the thing that I want to see happen in moving forward with this redistricting. And we have listened to all of these comments. We have listened to all of this input, and we have made a very good faith effort in incorporating those. When the request was made to come up with a consolidated map, incorporating the, I guess, 4 previous maps, I didn't think it would work. Shows what I know, because it turns out to be the best of all in terms of the deviation. And so I am willing to take the input that we have had from the public, meeting the rules and procedures that we have to follow, and I think the consolidated map incorporates that and does the best job of that, and that's where I will support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Stanford, would you like to make that in the form of a motion?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I would move that the Finance and Administrative Committee recommend that the Town Council adopt what's been referred to as Alternative 5, the consolidated map, as the new wards map for Hilton Head Island moving forward for the coming 10 years.
It's been properly moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And second. Okay, I would open it up for further discussion at the committee level. But before we do that, Josh has Alternative 5 complied with all the required elements in the regulation.
Yes, sir. We reviewed the requirements of Alternative 5. As you're familiar, the software program that we have does a series of checks to make sure that all of those guidelines are met. With that one, each one of the guidelines are met.
So it would be a qualified option.
Yes, sir.
Discussion.
I've had my say.
I have no further comments, Mr. Chair.
If there is none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by the same. Motion carries, Krista, 4-0.
Thank you, sir.
Any other business to come before the committee?
Move for adjournment, sir.
Thank you. We stand adjourned.